Good afternoon. I'm back. Seems like with the holidays and the move and now getting my papers back together and getting my brain working back in that area. So I think it's interesting. What I'm finding is I don't know, and I don't think people necessarily, when they're trying to do something like this, know where it's going to lead to. So one of the things back in, I think it was episode 22, I had written about the warriors, and I think that it was these military. It runs very, very thick through my ancestry and on my relatives, and then in even in the present, and I've covered that before. But back then, I had actually talked about the Craddocks was a family that was connected to the Allnutts in Montana. Now, Roy Allnutt was my grandfather, my mother's father, and he had 11. There was 11 kids in the family, and so I'd mentioned Craddock, and one of Grandpa Roy's sister's name was Lillian, and Lillian married a Craddock. And when I was back there visiting in Hamilton, going to the different cemeteries and looking around, I noticed there was a lot of Craddocks. And so later I found out in some of my research that Craddocks was one of the first families to come into the Bitterroot Mountains. I think it was like 1875 when they came from Missouri and headed out towards Montana and did that trek like many other people had done. And so I had commented about the Craddock in relationship to um, there was a lot of the Craddocks married the O'Malleys, and the O'Malleys, when I never did find them in Denver. So, I lived there for a couple of years and I kept trying to reach them in multiple ways and sending them messages through Ancestry and never got a response. And so, but I had noticed when I did the genealogy research part of it, there was a lot of in that family, in the O'Malley family, there was a lot of military people in that. And and it varies again by which wars and who was fighting for like World War I or World War II, and or Vietnam. So anyway, and this is where it gets kind of funny because that was session 22, which was kind of a long time ago. I think I was still in Denver at that time. I think this is like number 28. So anyway, so when I did my last video, I noticed when I went to upload the actual video into where I, you know, put it together into the YouTube channel that I'm running, and it was running really, really slow, and it hadn't been that slow in Denver. So I called T-Mobile, which I've been with them for like 17 years with my phone and now internet for several years. So when I called, and I know most people that are watching this know exactly probably what the direction I was going, but immediately I got put into a, um, call center type little whirligig that they played music and then they said if da 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 da, I mean, so, and I timed it. I do that quite often, and I try to like meditate and do something constructive when I'm stuck in some of those scenarios. But I didn't want to hang up because I was afraid I'd get back in a larger loop, and I really needed to know why this my videos were not uploading faster. So eventually, after 45 minutes, this young woman came on the phone, and it was a little hard for me to understand certain things that she was saying because of her accent, which I found, a lot of people, a lot of companies in the United States have outsourced to various locations, and and so sometimes that's a little bit difficult, when you're having the information. But I was very, very impressed with her customer service. I noticed that immediately, and her name was May, and she listened to me, which sometimes when I get into those situations, they do all the talking and I don't necessarily get to say everything I want to say. But she did. She really listened to what I was talking about. So we were chatting back and forth, and she was running the speed of how fast the uploads and the downloads were in my area now here in Albuquerque. And so we were chatting while the tests were being ran. And oh, she said, "Oh, your name's McDonald. My son, 4 years old, loves McDonald food." And so she went on about that. And then I had explained to her why, that I had this website and this is why I was doing this, so I could do my videos. And so she was very interested in that also. And she said her father was also interested and had talked about, their genealogy. So anyway, we went back and forth. But eventually I did ask her where she was at. And she said she was in the Philippines. And I all of a sudden remembered back what the Craddocks, and then into the O'Malleys. One of the O'Malley daughters had actually married a guy, Robert H. Hanson was his name, and he was from the Philippines. And I want to give credit to somebody named Lake Runner, who did a lot of good additional research that I hadn't seen before, and then I could back it up with all the facts that I have, on this family of Hansons. And so I'm going to probably have to split it up a little bit because it's fascinating all the information. So she married the son, and then I have information on his father, which was just phenomenal. And then he actually had a brother, and they were all in the military also, which was interesting. And so I started working on Robert, and Doris is who he married, the Doris O'Malley. And they did have children. So there is a connection. And sometimes I think the DNA is a little bit confusing, but and I might do a special just on that so people can understand the kind of a simplistic way to look at, yeah, these are many generations, going through many different families, but they still have DNA from the original DNA. It just becomes less and less and less and less. So when I'm doing my genealogy, I really always try to take the DNA matches. That's the only thing I work with mainly. And I go until so at the end of Robert today, when I was, reviewing some of this before I started the video, he actually, they had one daughter, but then when I looked up the one daughter, she never married. So that's the end of any DNA match in this situation. So then it drops off. But I think that there'll be some really good information and that I want to convey. So I see this as probably being part one because I wanted to talk about Robert. Um, and his middle initial was H, and it was Hanson spelled with S-O-N. Now sometimes, and it's not uncommon to see McDonald or MacDonald or this Hanson and spelled S-O-N or S-E-N. But most of the records I saw, he actually was going by S-O-N. So and there was a picture of him, and I had mentioned, I think, in the other video that it actually somehow in the military records when I was reading them said he was about 6 feet tall, but only weighed 115 pounds or something like that. And I was like, oh, but there is a picture of him, a very nice looking young man in this picture. And so he was actually now this is where it gets interesting. So he had a brother and then his dad, and they were all in the military. So the dad's story is very, very interesting. But his brother actually fought in the Spanish War. So I'm still doing some research on the Spanish War because I always heard of it, but then when I all of a sudden I see it fitting into what the period of time that I'm working on right now, um, I learned a great deal. I started to learn a great deal. But his Robert's brother actually was on a ship down in the canal during the Spanish American War, and the Japanese dropped bombs on the ship, and he was actually killed. And so the brother, he was buried at sea, which was another thing that I actually did some research on. And when we talk more about his brother, I'll explain it to you. But it was interesting. So when I first started working on Robert, he was born at sea. So his mother was pregnant when they left the Philippines going towards Hawaii, and he was actually born at sea. And so it's kind of a combination of, here's one brother being born at sea and the other born being died at in the sea and or buried even in the sea. And I had a lot of questions in my mind. You probably know me as far as when if you're watching my videos, as I get really intrigued. And so I did some research, and which I'll share, about sea burials and how do they get, is there some kind of markers for them or something like that? It was a little off the track, totally of, but that's what happens to me sometimes. Um, I think I always let everybody know that's watching these that everything I do and all the stories that I put together is from the actual facts in Ancestry or any other place I can find the records, like find a grave or there's a lot of different places to find the actual, and for instance, like all these military people, their military records are right there before me. So sometimes when people think that I am telling a story, like I'm pulling it out of the air or something like that, and um, and that's, I just want to explain that again, that everything that I'm talking about is backed up in Ancestry, and anybody that wants to leave a comment on my site even, and I do get comments and I appreciate the comments. If there's any questions of somebody else working on this family, I would love to hear from them because you can imagine, I mean, some of this information does get researched thoroughly, and sometimes there is a confusion or something like that. But I don't really try to, if I'm still confused about the family connections, I will not make a video out of it because I'm taking that detail. So it's like right now, I'm sitting here with a picture of Robert up here, and the information that's there is what I am putting into this video. And if anybody wants to go on ancestry.com and follow along, I would really welcome that. I always enjoy people that are doing genealogy and enjoying my videos. So that's a big part of it. But so Robert, then he was in Hawaii, and then I think from the sounds of it, he ended up going to San Francisco eventually, and that's where he would have met Doris. Doris was a telephone operator, I think it said on the census report. And and then they had the one daughter in San Francisco, and she died fairly early, but he lived to be 85 years old, but the whole family was really so military, and they didn't come, they weren't born in the United States, so the father was born in many other areas of Europe. And so his name was Otto, and I'm gonna like probably cut it off in a little bit, and then I'll put Otto probably out tomorrow. And then there's a wife. His wife was interesting, and but Robert and this Doris, um, lived in San Francisco or San Mateo. I think on his, yeah, he's buried. He died in San Mateo County in California, and he's buried at a Gate of Heaven Catholic cemetery, which was interesting when I saw that because of his military background. I would have thought maybe he would have been at the Presidio or someplace, where there was a military, but there is a headstone, but it's not the typical military. So, and it's great, and I have other pictures, and I've got to get them out to put them on Ancestry also, so that people that want to do research and follow what I'm doing, if you're in this, there's a number of people that I know are watching my videos that are connected by DNA. But there's a whole lot of people that just love listening and watching me take the genealogy information and all the records and then put it together. And I have to say, it's a hobby of mine, but it's very fun, and I enjoy all my time that I'm involved. And a lot of times, I'll do like genealogy. Like today, I probably spent an hour, hour and a half, even though most of it was kind of ready for the video, just reminding myself so I don't have a script, but in my head I have it all, and I try to remember all the different pieces of it by you know, kind of reviewing everything I plan on talking to the viewers with. So I think that I'm going to go ahead and sign off with this. I'm trying to kind of get my videos to be between 15 and 18 minutes, something like that. It's like I have to read and keep up on what YouTube is their requirement. And I think a couple of times I got and went over the limit. And I know sometimes that's kind of long for people to sit and listen to me go on about what I love. But yeah, so I will probably, depending on how fast my internet is, I may be able to do another one even tomorrow and pick up on the dad because he's very interesting also. So bye.